Hello again. So we've now got a talk by Roberto Sánchez and Santiago Rincón about long-term support starts in unstable.
All right, thank you. So thanks everyone for being here. The goal of this talk is to consider various possible ways that we would be the LTS team and more broadly Debian developers, and yet more broadly the Debian project as a whole can work to improve the outcomes that we get from LTS through a mindset that's a little bit more oriented to the idea of LTS starts in unstable, right? In general, we think of LTS starts, not at release, but several years after release when the security team is done supporting, then we think of LTS starting at that point, and we want to kind of do away with that a little bit and just kind of think of it more on a spectrum and kind of bring that idea of LTS to really all the way back to unstable and look at it more from a long-term perspective or an overall perspective. So I'm going to include brief discussions about the history of LTS and some background, what LTS is and what it's not, what unstable is and what it's not, some ways in which maintainers can start to think about LTS and the impact on the long-term supportability of packages from the time that the packages enter unstable, ways that the LTS team can perhaps work better to help maintainers maintain those packages in unstable, and then maybe some thoughts about what we as a project overall can do to help. Feel free to ask questions throughout or anything like that, or ask for clarifications along the way. So the origin of LTS was through Frixian and through Rafael Herzog, and the effort to provide Debian has had a reputation for stability since forever, but the idea was to sort of extend that for an individual release to a longer time frame to make the choice of Debian more appealing to companies that didn't want to feel sort of pressured to upgrade every couple of years. So the goal really is to ensure that there are timely security updates up to 5 years after or 5 years following the initial stable release. And then the secondary goal is that surplus funds that are pledged by sponsors towards supporting the LTS effort would be used towards improvements in the overall Debian security and project initiatives, not just kind of confined to LTS. So by the time that the LTS initiative started in 2014, so we're approaching 10 years since the official commencement or beginning of this effort. This was already the normal practice of several other well-known distros of making either every release or selected releases supported for timeframes of between 5 and 10 years. So we kind of reached a point where Debian had a great reputation for stability, but due to resource limitations within the security team, when the next stable release came out, the focus kind of would shift to that. And so the idea was to do something that there was already clearly a demand for. So at the moment, there are dozens of sponsors, and they're all publicly known. And these include hardware vendors, cloud service providers, consultancies, academic institutions, government organizations. And it's really a very collaborative effort. We have Debian developers who are interested in doing the work, reviewing the vulnerabilities, triaging them, backporting patches, in some cases developing new patches if there's not already a fix developed for a particular vulnerability, contributing those maybe newly developed patches back to more recent Debian releases, helping out the security team. Sometimes other distros will take those. And so We have all of that going on. There are corporate and individual sponsors interested in funding the work. And then we have members and maintainers in other Debian teams, security team, FTP masters, and so on and so forth, who are also willing to assist in the work in some degree or another. In very much the same way as the security team, the LTS team has a commitment to being as transparent as possible. We do as much of our work as we can in the main security tracker. We contribute back to that. We update the triage notes if we have additional information to provide. All these things, and we try to balance that with the occasional limitation that comes along with the nature of security work. We do have a couple of team members who are privy to embargoed advisories, and naturally, just as with the security team, those things are not done out in the open. Those things are, it's only whenever the appropriate date and milestones have passed that these things are then published. We do publish monthly reports of our activities as an LTS team. Every contributor is required to submit an individual report, and then those are aggregated on a monthly basis. That provides kind of a highlight, usually that's authored by myself and or Santiago. And at the moment, we have 23 active paid contributors. And then, of course, there are, again, other folks. We have a couple of folks on the security team who are regularly interacting with and helping out, like Cardinal and Moritz on the security team are often helping out us with LTS. We have LTS folks helping out the security team as well. And as of last week, we've published 3,654 DLAs or Debian LTS advisories, so the LTS version of the DSA. So this is a nice, pretty graph with colored squiggly lines, and the idea is this kind of shows the occurrence of over time. In the blue, we have the quantity of DLAs over time, and then in the orange, we have the quantity of vulnerabilities that were addressed by those DLAs. So during the course of the nearly last 10 years, LTS contributors, both paid contributors and some volunteer contributors, have published. So this represents actually 3,800 total advisories. About 3,650, as I mentioned, are the unique ones, and then of course there are about another 150 regression revision. You know, every once in a while we get a bad patch from upstream, or we develop a bad patch, or some unknown issue comes up and has to be addressed. And it's covered a grand total over this time frame of over 11,900 CVEs. So this is a non-trivial amount of work here that has gone into this, and it's it continues to grow in terms of sponsors, contributors, fixes that are being made, and this really demonstrates that having Debian releases supported for a longer period of time does provide value to users of Debian. So there are people out there. I don't know that we've reached the point where in the Antarctic they're benefiting from this yet. For those of you who saw Carlos's lightning talk earlier, but there's clearly value here being provided to the community of users. So what is LTS? In the idea, again, is not to say we have the stable release period and that comes to a definitive end, and then the LTS period starts. It's more about thinking of it from the perspective of LTS is in the life cycle of every Debian release. Compared to the historical norm prior to the LTS initiative, three years would have been about the time, and I understand there were times in the project history where we had significantly longer gaps between our stable releases, but in the recent past, the norm would have been about 3 years. Distros like Red Hat and Ubuntu have shown that there's demand for this kind of longer support concept. And in my own personal experience, it's been helpful to have something like LTS, where I had a project that I was on, and we had servers that were near the end of the life of the hardware, but we needed like another year. and LTS. Had we not had because I was the one making the choice of what we deployed, I naturally chose Debian. And of course, we were kind of in that position where had we not had something like LTS, we would have had to invest resources into probably upgrading a couple of dozen servers that within a year we were going to decommission. So there's value, here in that we didn't have to expend resources on not worthless work, but work that would have been of very little value. So the additional resources that are being brought to bear by the LTS initiative are allowing us to now provide 5 years of support, stable support for every version of Debian following its initial stable release. As I mentioned, we closely collaborate with the security team, and doing this more closely aligns Debian with other distros. I think the norm for Red Hat is 10 years. Ubuntu, they do an LTS release every other year. That is, was it 5 years, 7 years, somewhere in that time frame. So we are we resemble more of what the typical enterprise distribution does. This makes Debian more attractive for enterprises than it was before. Again, the balancing act here is prompt security and bug fixes with a need for stability, very much like what the security team does during the time that they have primary responsibility. And as I mentioned, it is LTS is funded by sponsorships. This is one area in which it is rather different than a lot of other things that are going on within Debian. So what is LTS not? So LTS is not a place for disruptive changes. Asterisk. Okay, so now let me explain the asterisk. There are times when it is not really possible to backport fixes, or when continuing to support, or even continuing to support a package at all. And when this happens, we have to consider what would ordinarily be deemed inappropriate types of changes in a stable security type of context, like backporting an entirely new upstream major release of a package, or potentially dropping support or reducing the scope of support. This is already, the security team already deals with this. Node is a good example. Right, Node and is Go. I think these are ecosystems that have inherent challenges. Other specific packages like Samba, for example, the Active Directory domain controller support doesn't get supported. That feature set doesn't get supported forever because of the difficulties in backporting patches and the complexity of testing and all that. So choices are made rather than dropping a package or excluding a package altogether, like in the Samba case, to exclude a certain set of features and say, well, we will support everything else, but this is beyond our ability to support. So those are the kinds of things that we also deal with in LTS that have the possibility of becoming disruptive. They tend to be a bit more of an issue for LTS because the further away that you get from the upstream release and the upstream support, the more likely you are to end up in one of these situations where support becomes technically infeasible or not cost efficient, or any of a number of things. So LTS is not trying to replace package maintainers. We're not trying to take over packages or dictate packaging workflows. We have a lot of thoughts based on the work that we've done about improvements that we'd like to see in how packages are maintained, but we also believe Debian's meritocratic culture demands that we demonstrate the value of the changes we propose and that we help bear the burden of implementation. So we have folks within the LTS team who are involved in those types of initiatives outside of like if you just drew a circle around LTS activities that are involved in areas outside of that, trying to bring some of these improvements to various other aspects of Debian. Like my friend Santiago here, who is a Salsa CI maintainer, and we have a lot of thoughts, and so he spends a non-trivial amount of time working on CI-related improvements that benefit, can have the potential to benefit all package maintainers who are willing to leverage those things. And we want to, in general, make sure that we improve unstable and stable along the way. We want to not create an incentive for users to stay on older releases of Debian because they're somehow better than the more recent ones. We still want people to continue to upgrade and those kind of things. So we want to be aware of that and try to balance that along the way. And as I mentioned on the last slide, LTS is not a separate and distinct product life cycle. And the example here would be like Ubuntu, right? They have a release, a release, a release. This one's an LTS release, then another release, and then, it's not like we are every other stable. LTS is a concept that we are wanting for everyone to think of as being a part of the life of every Debian stable release. So in that respect, it would be more like Red Hat, where they make a release and they say 10 years. We will support this for 10 years, and that's the case for every major release that they make. Granted, they apply different criteria and stuff, but that's the general concept. So unstable is where packages customarily enter Debian. And in many ways, from the Debian developer perspective, the project really revolves around unstable. That's where we do all of the really important things from the standpoint of major changes happen there first. We get the latest upstream releases of packages in there. We are working on preparing the next stable release. We are thinking about the long-term impacts of packaging decisions, restructuring certain things, things like merged user and transition to systemd. Like all these huge things all happened in unstable. So we already, in general, have a notion of thinking of unstable as a place where, yes, we make disruptive changes, but we have to think about the very long-term impacts of those changes. And so we want to do a bit more of that from the standpoint of individual packages as well. So it's the place to think about it, to lay the groundwork for what will eventually become LTS. And again, that's not something way far off into the future. It's something that starts there in unstable. And so then unstable, what is it not? It's not another release, right? It's not like another stable. It's not an LTS. It's not meant for wide adoption by users requiring security and stability. I understand that there are people who do that, but that they, if it breaks, they get to keep both pieces. So this makes unstable, it really makes it natural to think of it as the place where if we're, our position is this is not meant for wide production deployment, not meant for your situations where you need security or whatever. This can be the place where we can make disruptive changes. At the same time, our current practices don't promote timely targeted security fixes into unstable. There is no team that deals with this. It's really a matter of maintainer discretion. There are some maintainers, particularly there are some very high-profile packages that the maintainers or maintainer teams work really hard to have the latest upstream releases with all the available security fixes in unstable as quickly after upstream releases it as possible. There are some maintainers who don't do this because it's not possible due to complexity. We have some extraordinarily complex packages and package ecosystems that live in unstable, and they can be stuck, if you want to call it that, at a given major upstream release for quite some time. And that has the potential to create security issues. And again, we don't think of unstable as the place where we want to provide this very timely security support, but there's very possibly a case to be made that maybe there ought to be a dedicated team and policy that addresses this. There is the potential for a benefit there in a way that kind of helps create this idea of LTS throughout the life of a Debian release, not just starting years after release, not even just starting at release, but kind of going all the way back into unstable.
So, as you have seen, the main goal of this presentation is to talk about the LTS of the 5-year support starts effectively in unstable. So we repeat several times this, and this is a teaching strategy to efficiently spread the message. And so one of our goals here is to discuss our ideas or how we could better cooperate efficiently with the rest of the Debian project. Some of these ideas are obvious, but we think that it's very important to make them explicitly stated. The first one is that it is very good to have the latest upstream release in stable just before the freeze. Also, when an upstream project has LTS branches or version, it is very helpful if only those LTS versions are uploaded to unstable. Anything else could be uploaded to experimental. MariaDB is kind of example of this because they only upload the LTS versions to unstable and they don't package anything else. So that's what I said. It's a kind of example. For better coordinating for better collaborate with the rest of the team, we like to discuss how we work, because some early choices could increase this collaboration with the LTS team. So we maintain all the package updates in Salsa. So it helps us if the maintainers also maintain the packages in Salsa. We also try to do as much as possible to use the deb14 repo structure. We tag the package releases, so it's great also to see if the maintainers do the same. And please document in the readme.source anything that is not a non-standard procedure for packaging. To minimize the possibilities of regressions or problems in our updates, we are relying on continuous integration tools, Salsa CI and AutoPackageTest, for example. So having a very well-maintained CI, AutoPackageTest, in unstable has a very big impact will have a very big impact in stable and also in the LTS period. So how maintainers can help? For those maintainers that will help, and actually the LTS team, the LTS project, it's welcomes contributions from package maintainers, from patches to fully prepare and test the updates, to reviews, to etc. For those maintainers that would like to help, we require them to be familiar with related workflows. Most of the guidelines that concern the security updates in Debian also apply for LTS. Other than that, we have additional workflows that especially relates to Git and the continuous integration. One key difference with the stable is that we don't have point releases. So all the updates have to target the security distribution, the security suite. Sorry. We have a couple of files in our Git repository for explicitly state which maintainers want to be involved, and which maintainers don't want to be involved in those updates. So we welcome everybody, and so please tell us if you want to be part of the update, and we could explicitly state that in our tooling. Actually, part of this is not really implemented. As I previously said, it helps us a lot for those non-conventional toolings in the Debian packaging. It is really helpful to document that in the Debian.source. And also, it will be great if we will have some machine-readable AOL data information in Debian packages. That's something that we would like to implement and to propose, but this is not currently possible. How maintainers can still help. Since the 5-year support starts in unstable, it will be great if the maintainers discuss with upstream developers to adjust their release cycle to Debian and to the Debian releases. For example, to release a couple of months before the freeze. Well, I have already mentioned that if the maintainers want to be involved or not in the LTS updates, we have a couple of files that state that. Another thing, since we use Salsa, we can document if there is a preference from the maintainers to use the same repository for the LTS updates, or if they prefer to have it in our own Salsa namespace. Of course, maintainers could help if they are willing to review the proposed backport patches. And again, it's great if the auto-package tests are well maintained, because they will help us also in the future. How the LTS team can help. Since we rely on auto-package test and the other CI tools, but we could assist to the maintainers to maintain those tools. We could also assist in maintaining in structuring better the repository to match the dep 14, because that makes much easier the collaboration with the rest of the project. So we are willing to assist if required. Of course, we can test backported patches, because we know the workflow, and we could easily patch the packages and just run our tooling. We can assist with updates to finish the updates. There are some maintainers that want to prepare the update, but they don't want to do the paperwork. So also we can do that. And as the sponsorship increases, we are also happy to invest in projects and tools that enhances the Debian in general, the Debian overall. Well, how the Debian project can help. These suggestions involve more than straightforward decisions from the maintainers from specific packages. But if these proposals were implemented, there will be the beneficial will be very significant. There has been an idea that has been discussed these days. It will be awesome if Debian and, for example, another vendors, especially Ubuntu and Ubuntu LTS, will align the release dates. This is twofold. First, because some upstream projects release accordingly to their favorite distro. If we will have a combined Debian and Ubuntu LTS, there will have a better incentive to also adjust the point releases or the major LTS versions, whatever, to this combined release date. And that will be great. And also because it will make easier the collaboration between the security team in Ubuntu and the security team in Debian and the LTS teams also. We could deduplicate some efforts made on this. A bad example of this is Samba, which is completely uncoordinated and not aligned between Ubuntu, LTS, and Debian. And it's a pity because they have to do the work, and we have to make another work, and we could deduplicate all of this. There have been some cases where users that have to stick in with Debian LTS, they will benefit if there will be major upstream releases also in an additional repository, because they have to stick in LTS. But for example, for MariaDB in Buster, which is the 10.3, if I'm not wrong, now this MariaDB releases is on the end of support in upstream, but they have to stick. The users have to still stick in Buster, and we need another MariaDB available for them. So, and this has to be done in supplementary repositories in the form of PPAs or something like that. There are high-profile projects like Firefox, MariaDB, PostgreSQL that has to be updated via point releases. And I think it could be useful to publish some criteria for those upstream projects to help them with all the things that we need to easily be incorporated in the Debian updates too. And that's it. Thank you for attending, and thank you for the great organization of this MiniDebConf. So, questions?
Yeah, hello. So when you do an LTS, apply the patch and build the package and release it, but what's the QA on this? Do you do any QA, or have you any thought about extending this?
So we, our process, we depend. The criteria for someone to be a regular member of the LTS team is that they are an experienced Debian developer, an experienced programmer, and have at least some level of experience doing prior security work. So a lot of it is on the individual contributor because there is such a wide variation in in how much testing upstream does, where the patch came from. So we don't have like a uniform QA requirement. That's really up to the individual working on the update. I can tell you it's common for somebody to backport a patch and then send an email to the team mailing list like, hey, could somebody please review this patch for me to make sure I backported it correctly? Or I did some basic testing. Could somebody who understands this package as well also do some testing? And so those are very situational, but those are the kinds of things that we do often. So I don't know if that really answers.
Yeah, I think it needs more QA. For example, systemd updates restart the daemons, and then you have systemd network D restarts and wiping all the floating IPs, and that causes problems in production when you apply these security fixes. And Apache is also, usually when you restart daemons or Docker, those cause issues during production. So I don't know if we can mitigate those somehow, or we can do something, or more QA on these changes, or not sure. But
yeah, and that sounds like the kind of thing that would probably need to be tackled, I think, by the security team and the LTS team. It seems like that, like the things you're describing are not unique to our particular team. So yeah, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's why we try to use or rely on auto-package test as much as possible. And that's why we invite the maintainers to have a very well maintained and covered auto-package test in unstable. Because at the end it will be used in stable updates and LTS updates. So the QA also starts there, other than all the things that we do, as Roberto has said. Okay. So the auto-package tests are very important for us. And also we incorporate as much as possible the Salsa CI pipeline. That helps too.
Anyway, thanks for all the work. So that's very appreciated.
Hello, I'm a bit surprised about the recommendation for LTS branch in unstable. What I would more expect is that what we want is to have the near, because our freeze typically is rather long. What you want to have is at the start of your cycle, you want to have the LTS branch in your stable release, right? If you would be working all the time on LTS in unstable, you are typically far behind the moment that you actually start the stable release. And I guess another point on that recommendation is that I was wondering, do we not want to contribute actually finding issues in unstable that actually can improve the upstream branch by exposing their to-be LTS branch later on, already in unstable and testing?
So
I guess there are two questions there.
Yeah, no, it is. Okay, and so, yeah, I think they're both fair questions. Yeah, I do think the idea, and maybe a better way of expressing it is, for maintainers who are only going to have one major version of their software in Debian, it really should be the LTS version. There are some maintainers who will maintain multiple major upstream releases of whatever package or ecosystem they're maintaining, and in that case, those things, all the things you described, are happening, right? But there are some instances where it's not. Like in general, there's like one major release of Tomcat in unstable. There's like one major release of MariaDB in unstable, and I think those in those instances where maybe there's just not enough resources on the maintainer team or whatever, then yeah, as we approach and the other aspect, as we approach the freeze, right? If we release unstable, a month later, a new upstream release comes out, then yeah, that's probably good to move to that new upstream release, as long as we do have a goal of before the next freeze, seeing that the whatever LTS, if the upstream has an LTS, because not all of them do, is what ends up frozen and in the next stable release. So I don't know if that directly answers your question. But
yeah, more or less. It's just that our release cycle, of course, is long, 2 years. So particularly if you think about the start of the release cycle, I think there's a fair room to also contribute by having not LTS in unstable, but I guess it's more a point towards the end of the release cycle where we're preparing for a stable, where you want to ensure that you have an LTS in stable, because I think that's actually what you're asking, not so much of it being in unstable, but by the time we get into the freeze, that's the case. Or am I then misrepresenting?
No, I think that's a fair way to adjust what we were saying to be more precise. So yeah, I would say that's fair.
And I think as a release team member, that's also something I think makes sense from our point of view as being a request. And actually, maybe I'm plugging something that I have an idea of as a release team member, which is related to this topic, and maybe an incentive for maintainers to actually do that. During the past couple of releases, we have had several unblock requests on basically upstream point releases on their LTS branch. And at least I'm considering, and I've written a proposal for the team to actually come up with a list where teams that want to have their LTS already during the release, they can subscribe to that, not a mail list, but really a list of who to accept, where we're going to reduce the unblock process for packages that are explicitly listed on this list, where we've already judged the process of upstream such that we can handle much later in the freeze an unblock for an LTS point release for upstream projects that can support that. I think so. There would be benefit, well, in both approaches, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there are projects that have a history. Postgres, and I think the Mozilla with the ESR, they have really good, rigorous processes. And so, yeah, I think that makes sense, and we would absolutely agree.
So I'm concerned there's quite a bit of tension here between what's good for you and what some maintainers think is good for them. I totally understand you'd like to maybe shift our release dates to align with Ubuntu and LTS. Frankly, no, I don't want to. I know around the Bullseye release there was a problem where in the LTS folks at the time wanted to say, and this is where we start. But Debian wasn't ready. We weren't ready to freeze, and we were being pressured as maintainers in the rest of Debian to conform to what you guys wanted, but you're the ones being paid for it. We're doing it on our timetable. That was a real tension, and I hope that we can discuss that properly. There's a bit of a tail wagging the dog here, is the feeling I've got, and I'm a little bit worried about that. Equally, some of the maintainers, and I've heard people calling this out, may not necessarily have the time or the interest in continuing to do patch review of backported patches and whatever for 5 years, as opposed to the 3 that they were initially expecting. I understand you're not necessarily pushing for that, but the expectation has changed, and that's a worry.
I do see your point, Steve, but I feel like a lot of the things being asked here, like audit package tests, setting up CI, trying to follow LTS branches, would also be valuable for stable, for being able to do bug fix and security updates during the regular stable maintenance period.
Sure, to a point. Yeah.
And one thing that I'll say to address, like the patch review thing specifically, like Santiago was saying, we within our tooling, there are maintainers who are like, please never talk to me about LTS stuff ever, and we honor that. And then we have other maintainers who really like to be involved, and they like to, kind of like Santiago was saying, they actually like to prepare the updates and build the packages and everything, and they hand it to us, and we just do the paperwork, and we're happy to accept those contributions. So we definitely don't want to seem as we are trying to force things on people. When we ask for things of maintainers, we really want to be very sensitive to that. And right now, our primary focus is auto package test, CI, like some of these things that we think are beneficial to the overall quality of the distribution.
Sure. And again, we are happy to help to set up these things as much as possible.
Good. Yeah. That's very appreciated.
Can I add one comment? Also, the release team is using the auto package test for the point releases. So nowadays, already in the proper Debian or whatever you want, the voluntary Debian, we're using the auto package test to check what the update does. So in that sense, it's just an extension of the same thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just a quick one. The slide said something about a please call me for LTS and please leave me alone list, but I just had a look and couldn't find such a list. Does it actually exist already? Is this a bit like the DMD list?
They're in the security tracker.
Right, okay. But, so, yeah, I'd never heard of it, but it sounds like a good idea, if, as you say, whether people want to be bothered or not. But
yeah, they're either like in the org or the data directory of the security tracker.
Okay. Actually, so, what does your average maintainer do to say?
This is actually updated by the security team by us when we communicate with the maintainers. So
right. Okay. So you're tracking that list rather than expecting maintainers to add themselves to it.
If you tell us, please tell us when there is some need, and we call you when an update is needed, so we update the file. Or no, please don't tell us. So it is up to us.
How do we communicate this information to you if this is
So the question was, how would this be communicated to us? The most effective way is email us on the Debian LTS mailing list. It's on Debian-LTS at list.debian.org. All the team members monitor that, and that's ideally the best way to let us know, because it's rarely as simple as please always call me or please don't call me. Usually there's some, the maintainers will want to express some level of these are the things I'm interested in doing, these are the things I'm not interested in doing, these are the things that rise to the level of I want to be bothered about or whatever. So the best thing is get in touch with us on the mailing list.
I wanted to react to Steve's comment early, just to give some context. The idea of aligning Ubuntu and Debian release is not coming out of the blue. It's because we are trying to improve the general free software ecosystem. For instance, we were discussing with people in Samba who are only supporting the release for 1 year and a half to provide some LTS release. And we were ready to put some money on the table for them to do this and share it to everybody for the benefit of all the distribution, of all the users. Obviously, we're still a small company, out of us, and we can't necessarily fund that kind of stuff for all free software projects around the world. So we are interested in mutualizing that kind of work. And the natural partner for us was Canonical, so we reached out to them, and they were interested. But now comes the question, which Samba release do we ask them to support as LTS for the benefit of everybody? But we don't have the same release. So that's how we came to this discussion again. And so it's not for our benefits, it's really for the free software ecosystem in general. We're trying to do the right thing for everybody. We're not here to make money, mainly. We're honestly, in Friction, we're working there for the benefit of Debian and still having a good work-life balance. We're not interested in getting rich. But yeah, I hope that explains at least the context of this idea, why it comes back again. I fully understand that it's not doesn't necessarily interest everybody. I mean, if you're into development, free software development, and you care only about doing new stuff, you don't care about Debian being relevant for users after 5 or 10 years. But if we want to be relevant for everybody, as in universal operating system, we have to think about that kind of stuff. I mean, we have been discussing with customers like, I don't know, the CERN recently. They are a big users of Red Hat, Red Hat in general, and they want to have Debian support on par with with Red Hat support. And those are users who are putting Debian into production for very, very long term. I mean, just like the NATA story we had recently, when they built an accelerator, they have hardware running for more than 10 years. So, and if we want to continue to be the best distribution for those kind of users as well, it's important to try to work towards this. And maybe even more so now that we have weird regulations that are putting us under pressure to do a very good work in terms of security support. So, yeah, that's it.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a second question. How do your processes align with the security team? Well, the reason I ask is I've seen, my day job involves maintaining a derived distro. And we've seen CVEs reported as fixed in LTS that were marked as no DSA in stable.
Yep.
Please God, can we not do that? That is ludicrous and causes all kinds of confusion for our customers and for end users. We should have a consistent approach here, otherwise it makes us all look bad.
Would you say that that's the case even if we are also contributing the necessary fixes for that in stable as well and they're being accepted?
If they're going into stable with DSAs and whatever, then fine. It's when they're not consistent between stable and old stable. That's a problem.
That's been brought to our attention, and we have been making an effort to have better alignment, and that's part of the point of this. Is one of the things that was brought up was security fixes need to be going into unstable first, and it's like, well, we're not really set up for that, right? So we can't do that, but definitely we have taken this into account. And all of our contributors are aware that, hey, if you're working on a package for LTS and somebody's not already actively working on the same issue or same package for the security team to fix it in stable, then we should be doing both. And we should be trying to land the fix for both at the same time. So we are working on doing better at that.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry.
As a reminder, no DSA does not mean won't fix, not worth fixing at all. It means it doesn't merit a security update. It could still be fixed in a point release, but LTS does not have point releases, so all of the fixes have to go through security updates. It does mean that it's low priority, or should be low priority for LTS.
Using for a lot of end users.
Yeah, granted. There is one question there. No.
Yes, I was thinking about another project that is not enterprise-centered and where LTS could be really beneficial. So in France, we have what we call chatons, the kittens. It's a collective of alternative Libre hosters. In other countries, you have Libre hosters. So it's more or less non-beneficial organizations that host Libre software services for people, for other organizations, etc. And I know that a lot of them, in France at least, they use Altern C, which is an old software that is not always being updated, and it depends on an old PHP. So I really think that LTS could be beneficial for this kind of very important initiatives for the FOSS community. So my question to the LTS team is, how do you talk to these non-enterprise actors that need LTS, but they do not have maybe the money to sponsor it, or maybe they do not know about LTS?
Actually, the LTS repositories, the LTS related repositories are open, so any Debian user have access to it. So they don't have to put any money to benefit from the updates.
Yes, but when an enterprise comes and they say to you, I can sponsor, but I want you to work on one specific package more than another one. Is it how it works, or?
Okay, so yeah, let me offer a little bit of clarification. So, right, there is no, like Santiago was saying, there is no separate LTS repository. If a user sets up a Debian system as a stable release with the regular security repository, our fixes that the LTS team prepares will go into that same repository. So that during the entire lifetime, 5 years, that they will receive those updates. The scenario you're discussing would be if a customer were to approach more the commercial side of the company and say, we have a specific need for a specific package, then of course they can purchase support for that, but that's not the way LTS works. The way that the LTS works is a company comes in and says, we think this is good for us, for the community, whatever, we want to sponsor it, and so they provide the money, and we are not in a general way saying you can tell us what to prioritize. Now they will get access to support and various things as a bonus for funding the sponsorship, but this is not a way for a customer to come in and say, I want whatever my needs are to be taken care of before anybody else's. We do the normal security triage procedures and so on and so forth. So the sponsorship is funding that, but that doesn't enable the customer to dictate the way that we do our work or really our priorities in that way.
Okay, thank you.
We have some priorities about packages, but as Roberto said, the users don't, the corporate users don't dictate what we do.
Right. Sorry, 1 minute.
1
Yep.
minute, yeah.
Yep.
Coming back to what Steve was saying about it being very confusing when a security update goes out in a DLA and is marked as fix later, no DSA for stable. A concern I've often had about LTS sort of schemes is that the further back into retrocomputing you backport a fix, the more likely you are to get regressions from it, because you're backporting it onto a very different code base. And if something is no DSA, that means that the security team and the ordinary package maintainer have looked at the kind of cost-benefit trade-off of, is it worth fixing this? And have gone, actually, no, the regression risk doesn't compare well with the benefit. Or, at least, this needs more thought, more testing, more care before we ship it. So I wondered whether it might be worthwhile to hold back the DLA until after the fix, if there is going to be one, has been in a point release, or has at least got in proposed updates.
So we're effectively out of time, so I can't answer quite as thoroughly as I would like. But let me start by saying I somewhat dispute the way that you are approaching thinking about this. So no DSA is effectively a declaration that at this time this particular thing can't be addressed. In general, our experience, having plenty of interaction with the security team, is a lot of times that is driven by a lack of resources and an assessment of the severity or importance of a fix. Sometimes, yes, it is this is way too intrusive to backport. They often annotate that specific reason in the security tracker, and our general thought, and this came up, and I got basically flamed on the mailing list not that long ago because somebody was like, I have a critical bug in some, I forget what it was, it was a DB, like DB Berkeley or SQLite or whatever, this needs to be fixed. And the maintainer had actually refused to accept the patch for this, and I came up and said, look, if the maintainer says this has too high of a risk of a regression, and this is somebody who's familiar with the package, we're not going to come in and make a fix that's extremely high risk. So in general, if the maintainer or the security team have identified that risk, I can't think of an example where we've gone against that and said, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and push the fix through. Now, our resourcing situation is different, and we approach no DSA with a little bit of a different concept, and because we are able to fix more of these, we try to, but we try to couple that with getting them into stable, whether via point releases or whatever. That doesn't always happen. We're trying to do better at that. Okay.
I really appreciate that as someone who's met a maintainer of things that move kind of too fast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, we got to move because now we're going to cut into the next person's time.